I really didn't want to end up as a one-hit wonder. To me, I saw it that way. You're either gonna, flop, and that's it, or you got to get real serious about everything you've been looking at and learning. You got to go now. Now's the time. Otherwise, it'll probably pass you by.
How do you sleep at night? This is complete madness that was going on around you.
He's my worst enemy. He's our worst enemy. I mean, I couldn't get this stuff out of my head. It was just always like... Just, as he said, besides, I don't care. I don't care about the music. Just give me the money.
Oh, God.
And I looked at him. There wasn't much more to say after that.
In my humble opinion, that's a bad person right there, because he knows exactly what he did to you all those years, and he couldn't even let you have Old Man Down the Road and just let it just be.
I wrote a couple of songs that I submitted to my friend Saul Zaentz.
Saul Zaentz, my worst enemy.
All right, so we'll cover this guy a little later. First, I think it's important to see how CCR got to #1 in the first place.
I can't believe that the band, the CCR, was only around for 4 years. It's
That's
amazing,
true. Yeah.
Considering the material you guys put out there.
Well, I had been waiting my whole life. I love music, and I had been writing songs since I was 8 years old.
It was down in Louisiana, just about a mile from Texarkana.
Nope, it was actually 1,863 miles from Texarkana. Everyone in CCR was raised entirely in the Bay Area.
A lot of your music, you have this obsession with swamps, right? You're from Northern California, isn't that right?
Bay Area.
You're writing about bayous. There's no bayous up in the Bay Area. I thought you guys were from the South. I mean, you had to be from the South. You sounded like you were from the South. You looked like you were from the South.
Wish I was baked on a bayou.
I mean, to me, if the earliest icons of rock and roll are all from the South, that kind of was at least the map of where I should go.
Juggling on down to New Orleans.
Shoogling on down to New Orleans, just what does that mean?
You know what? I don't have the foggiest.
John's genius was in his simplicity.
Came out of the sky, landing just a little south of Mobile.
I thought the idea here was economy, especially in rock and roll. Don't use a lot of words when you can say it with two.
Why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
There was a point in the late 1960s where you were just on one heck of a ride. I mean, there's song after song. Everything you seemed to write seemed to turn to gold and was just an amazing piece of work. I love what Bruce Springsteen said, he compares you to Hank Williams.
He's the Hank Williams of our generation, the great John Fogerty.
It's an accurate description. These songs are timeless, and those songs just touched part of America's soul in the late 60s that I don't think a lot of other bands achieved.
Don't take things for granted, because they might be gone. Okay, well, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm really happy now. Things are fine, So I hate to come off as a whiner or a complainer, because I've done a bit of that in my past.
What was the first gold record you had?
Proud Mary.
Let me hold it up here because I want people to see it. This doesn't happen very often.
And I was starting to get on a roll and starting to be very careful. The story about Proud Mary is we had recorded the backing track and our background singing just wasn't good enough.
So this is an important story in the dynamic that began developing within CCR. So on Proud Mary, John didn't think the other guy's background vocals were good enough for him. So he waited until they left the studio and then re-recorded them on his own.
I said, you know what? I know what to do.
He was obsessed with creating the best sound possible, and he thought he was improving the song, but regardless, obviously the other guys are not gonna like this.
They weren't happy about it. They were angry at me about that. I literally didn't understand it, because why would it be negative? I thought when I was making Proud Mary better, I was making it better for us, my team, my band, my guys, right? It doesn't matter who of us does it. We gotta make the best record we can.
Tom, how would you characterize this music?
Characterize? Rock and roll music.
Does it come as a contribution of all the members of the group?
Oh, absolutely, always, yes.
And what's your occupation?
Recording artist, businessman, jokester, comedian, philosopher. I picked my nose on Friday morning.
We had too many guitar players in what evolved into CCR, so I became the bass player.
Nice. Now, before it was CCR, it was...
Same as McCartney.
There you go.
The worst thing that ever happened to my band was the Beatles, because the guys in my band thought they could be the Beatles.
When CCR started getting popular, John felt the other guys started looking around too much, trying to be hip instead of trying to make the best music possible.
To me, having a limo was pretty damn uptown.
They wanted to just go into the studio for a month and just wing an album like the Beatles because they thought that was cool.
The Beatles could do it because they were the freaking Beatles. No one else could. Not only did the Beatles have 3 of the greatest ever songwriters, they had 2 great singers plus another pretty good singer.
But CCR didn't have the natural talent of the Beatles. They had gotten to where they are by John's extreme focus on songwriting and developing a much more diligent process that he felt led to the best possible product.
Again, no one has come in with a song or even arrangement of music. It just hasn't happened. That isn't what happened in history. And I was getting busier and busier writing songs. And one day we're working on Green River and, we end our rehearsal. We're coming out to our cars with our guitars to get in. And Tom says to me, "You're getting quite a repertoire." But I could tell by the look on his face and the way it kind of came out almost hissing, it upset me. I drove home going, what was that? I mean, for most of the rest of the Creedence career, that was kind of the dynamic.
So John had done an overwhelming amount of the work that made CCR popular in the first place.
And after 2 years of success that way, the guys decided they wanted to write songs and sing them. And, in other words, they were more jealous of what I was doing, the kind of, the attention I was getting, than being worried about what was the best music or the best record we could make. Stu actually said at some point, well, Have You Ever Seen the Rain was written right on the spot. Well, the thing Stu didn't know, and maybe still doesn't know, is Have You Ever Seen the Rain is about the band breaking up. Now, I don't think we'd sit around and write our own epitaph. I wrote that at home, of course, and it just felt like something was really changing here. We get to the end of 1970, and the guys have confronted me, and there's a certain sense of more tense than normal, and the guys laid it out to me. We want to write songs. We want to sing the songs. We want to have more say-so in the running of Creedence. It's upsetting to me, but I can also see that the only way forward was for me to say, okay, and that's exactly what I said. All right. I was feeling, man, we've achieved all our dreams, and you guys are only talking about negative stuff. By your own volition, you bring in a huge rain cloud and cause it to rain.
These cats in your band thought they could do as good as that.
Well, they were playing, that's...
No, I mean writing-wise. I mean, they thought they...
I mean, sometimes when I listen...
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Because if I knew, I'd have done it myself. I'm saying outside of that, there's probably,
I should have called you. That's
4 or
right.
5 songwriters could even come close to doing things. I don't know what these people were thinking about. The act is a success.
Yes.
You've made it. You're there.
That's all that's all I cared about.
You're going to sit there and say, we made it to the World Series, but this guy had 50 home runs and I hit 8? No, you're going to say, we made it.
So John conceding creative control really marked the end of CCR, and his brother Tom quit before they even recorded anything under this new creatively democratic structure.
My brother Tom did a very remarkable thing. He left the band.
John was very confused by Tom leaving at the time, and later says it was probably due to his jealousy being the older brother, but not being the leader.
He wouldn't speak to me personally, tell him, we'll take a vacation. We don't have to do anything Creedence, we'll just stop. But he was very adamant, he wanted to leave the band. And I have to say, certainly after I didn't have my own brother, that I'd had to lobby to get in the band in the first place, it was quite different.
So they recorded one last album as just a trio where they shared creative control. This last album only went gold due to pre-sales and was met with very poor reviews.
Reviewers are calling it everything from shit to fucking shit. Doesn't that look like the worst thing ever?
The second half is where this story gets weird and sad. And from John's perspective, it was all due to one guy, Saul Zaentz. So this would take like a 10-part documentary to do all the details justice. I think the most interesting thing is that these events happened at all. So I'm just gonna try to quickly highlight what John felt were the worst incidents and betrayals.
You're watching USA, America's favorite cable network.
What words of wisdom would you give to people that were just starting out in the music business?
See a lawyer, then see another lawyer to look at that lawyer, then see another lawyer after that to see those two lawyers. And don't sign nothing until your mom reads it.
So back to this Saul Zaentz fella. If you give him a Google, it'll say he was a legendary film producer, but this film financing career was the direct result of the millions he made off of John's work in CCR. So back in 1967, Saul bought Fantasy Records for next to nothing because it was just this tiny, obscure jazz label at the time. What makes CCR's rise to the top even more remarkable is they did it by self-producing on shoestring budgets.
We don't have a manager, we don't have a publicist, we don't have a producer. You know, we don't have big money like Columbia Records or something. And I just said, all right, we're gonna have to do it with music.
So you'd think you'd take care of the guy that made your obscure jazz label millions of dollars and made you relevant from nothing. But after they gained popularity, Saul just does not seem interested in helping John out. And as a result, John kind of spiraled into a dark period where he had severe creative blockages and faced alcoholism and depression. And I'm sure the story's skewed some coming from John's side, but overall, I'm always gonna trust the creator of the music, especially if they feel as strongly as John does about Saul.
I was stomping through the woods, kicking rocks, yelling, f***ing lawyers, f***ing fantasy, fuck. God, John, you're such a loser.
I mean, I couldn't get this stuff out of my head. It was just always like, he's my worst enemy. He's our worst enemy. After that, I started drinking. You know, you tell yourself all kinds of things when you're being a fool. You know, the band broke up. My marriage had broken up. The other guys all got let go from their contract, but they were hanging on to me. I felt completely trapped, like I couldn't move.
I was a prisoner in Saul's dungeon.
So he owed Saul close to 200 songs, so he tries to negotiate a little better position for himself.
Look, I'm here because I'm finding that I really can't write. I can't create new songs or new music because I'm so tied in knots about this contract and this economic situation. Suddenly Saul Zaentz says, that's not true. Okay, huh? That's not true. The whole history of art shows that the best, greatest art in the world is always created under the conditions of oppression and depression. I go, I mean, no shit. I looked at him and I didn't even know how to respond, right?
But to make matters much worse, what happened next is what I found to be the most unbelievable part of John's whole story. So John and CCR, either knowingly or unknowingly, got mixed up in a very shady offshore bank.
And we had lost our life savings,
and we were suing Fantasy and also this entity called Castle Bank, which was an offshore, you've probably heard about these scams.
John's side of the story is he was young and naive, no knowledge about business stuff, and this was a bank that his record company and accountants had recommended and kind of talked them into using for tax purposes. But the bank collapsed, all the money was gone, and would never be seen again. The CCR guys end up recouping some of their savings, but to do it, they have to sue their accountant who advised them to hold their money there, so their eventual repayment comes from their accountant's insurance company. The 3 other band members were also suing John because they found out he had saved some of his earnings in a separate legit bank. Once they caught wind of that, they sued him to try to get a piece of that. So it's just a complete mess. And what's even worse, at this same time, Tom was looking for a record deal and no one would sign him, so he ended up going back to Fantasy and signing with Saul. At the same time, the whole band was suing Fantasy and Castle Bank for losing their life savings. And John just can't believe this, and to him, it's obvious Saul is just using Tom.
But anyway, so Saul was able to get Tom to be his ally at the very same time the band is suing him. It weakened our position, obviously. Is Saul kind of being a Machiavellian kind of political finagler,
So then shortly after, in 1985, John, remarkably, he goes #1 as a solo artist with his album Centerfield.
And hit a #1 with Centerfield was just a major rock and roll achievement. I mean, it was like when Mays won the MVP in '54. In 11 years, he did it in '65. That said, John Fogerty is still John Fogerty.
But this album also contains both a vague diss and a blatant diss track against Saul, and Saul's not happy about this. So he sues John, both for personal defamation and also for a third song that he claims is a copy of an old CCR song, which technically he owns even though John wrote and produced it.
I got sued for my new song, The Old Man Down the Road. Saul Zaentz contending that it was a direct copy of my older song, which he owned, Run Through the Jungle.
So Saul's trying to convince a jury that John's plagiarizing himself, basically.
When Saul was on the stand, my lawyer asked him, isn't it true that this case is just a vendetta against John? And he doesn't even quite get the sentence finished, my attorney asking Saul, and Saul says, it's an answer to a vendetta. You could just see the steam coming out. His face turned red. That was almost worth the price of admission to see him that upset.
So now we arrive at why John was singing about pigs. This song is the vendetta Saul was referring to. And he sues John for $140 million for personal defamation for this song. And what was possibly even worse to John than anything Saul did to him was what he discovered his bandmates did to him in 1988.
We finally learned that the other 3 guys have sold their voting right in Creedence to Saul Zaentz, my worst enemy. $30,000, 30 pieces of silver.
So that gave him a 3-to-1 advantage over John and basically complete control for anything he wanted to do with the CCR catalog. So John was very protective of his work and didn't like it being used in commercials or promotional albums.
I just hated those for a band of our stature. Elvis never did anything like that. The Beatles never did anything like that. And I was very protective of Creedence because we're a rock and roll band. We're not IBM. Right? We're not a business. It meant that Saul now controlled my band.
Back when it took a vote of all four of them to do anything, he would basically say no to all this stuff. So them selling their votes, John saw as kind of an ultimate betrayal.
If you were in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they ought to throw you out when they hear something like that, right?
And it's the reason he gives as to why he didn't let Doug and Stu play with him at CCR's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
Then I said to him, Stu, how could you sell your vote to Saul? He's my worst enemy. He's our worst enemy. And Stu said, I got tired of them asking me what movie or, what record one of our songs should be on. And then he says, I don't care about that. I don't care about the music. Just give me the money. Well, I excused myself. There wasn't much more to say.
So CCR still doesn't play together to this day. And John was so torn up by the band breaking up and then what happened after that he refused to play his own CCR songs in concert until 1997. But I think the real tragedy of this whole story is the rift that Saul created between John and Tom for his own personal gain. A rift that unfortunately was never reconciled.
I had tried to reconcile with Tom long before he died. I was pissed that Saul had mangled our relationship because he certainly messed it up. Tom was an unwitting pawn.
Well, the last album was really painful for me because the Old Man Down the Road sounded so much like Creedence that it was hard for me to get past that. So ultimately, I never bought the album, I never heard it.
Okay.
After I won the plagiarism trial, I ran into Tom. He said, "Congrats on the trial," like it was a science project. He had become so aloof, maddeningly detached.
I wrote a couple of songs that I submitted to my friend Saul Zaentz, who was the chairman of the board at Fantasy Records. And
Saul Zaentz, my worst enemy. I'd still get crazy letters. When Saul sued me over Zaentz Can't Dance, Tom wrote to me, "Saul and I will win." I don't think we got any further than that. It was sad that life had been taken from Tom, and that sadness was mixed up with all the other emotions. Saul Zaentz really poisoned my relationship with my brother. There's no doubt in my mind that things would have been different without Saul in the picture, that Tom and I would still be making music together today. Footnote: Saul Zaentz did not attend Tom's funeral. So much for being Tom's best friend. Of course, I'd known my brother all my life, Tom, and we loved music as kids, starting at a certain age, especially teenage and British invasion rock and roll, we were starting to, really revel in it. I remember being in the car when Will I Be Loved by the Everly Brothers came on, with that cool guitar, we looking at each other like, I just died and went to heaven. What is that? And we did that a lot.
It's kind of hard for me to talk about John and be unbiased, I think that he had one of the most unique voices. I think it's right up there with Ray Charles and Van Morrison. It's a voice that's distinct, and everybody already really liked that voice. And I had no idea that he would go on to write such great songs too, though. So I think he's great.
Tom may have been motivated to get money for his family because he was dying. I can see how that would hinder a person's judgment. And I think that's important to say. It's resolved. I love my brother. I sure loved the old family days. The way we were as kids.
What do you like to do in your spare time, if you have any spare time?
I like baseball and fishing.
Baseball. Do you have any words of wisdom to share?
I ain't no fortunate type. I ain't a fortunate type. I ain't a fortunate son.
Saul actually said to me once, money doesn't change you, it unmasks you. No shit, Saul.